is traveling around the world. He's in Rwanda right now, helping out a school over there. So if you want to learn more, the episode we recorded last week, we kind of dug into that, and it's pretty cool to hear what he's doing over there. But today I'm excited to have Graham Rosenberg join us. He's the director of Robotics Operations Center at SourcePass. Graham and I have worked together for, man, it's got to be 8 years now, something like that.
Yeah, we'll be 9 later this year.
Oh my goodness, man, time flies. Worked together for a long time, but excited to excited to just chat about some fun stuff around AI and automation. So, Graham, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Yeah, sure. So I joined Machine Logic back in 2016. That's when I met you. That was my first job in my IT career. Before that, I worked many service industry jobs, a lot of food service and whatnot. And once I graduated college, Machine Logic is where I landed. Started as a tier 1 help desk guy, resetting passwords and reinstalling applications, fighting with printers. And pretty quickly moved into kind of the manager of that team, and then managing all of service delivery, and then moving into just kind of running all of the operations for Machine Logic.
Yeah, and you had your fingers deep into the tool set for much of that time, right? So you were, driving all kinds of the configurations and trying to figure out how to get stuff to work together.
Yeah, that's kind of what, how I've kind of progressed throughout my career, is just looking at things and saying, hey, I don't like how this is working. How does this work? Oh, we can make this work way better.
Yeah.
And just kind of taking ownership of tools that way, and just getting more and more involved in all the MSP tools, and the integrations between them.
Every good MSP has a Graham somewhere kind of driving stuff forward. Probably 5 years ago or so, we started digging in a little deeper into automation, right? We started working on a customer portal and trying to automate stuff there. So you put a lot of work into that over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. We switched over to Cloud Radial. We didn't really have a portal before for our clients, and we were able to start sending webhooks and JSON data over to Power Automate, and that was all new to me. We had an engineer on our team that was, very helpful in kind of teaching me kind of those early skills, and it's kind of like the early days of automation for the MSP space. That was before tools like Roost or Pia or any of these other tools were on market, and just fighting with multi-tenancy and Power Automate and trying to make things work was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Big shout out to Jonathan. He's been on the show before, Jonathan Robbins, but he was a big help with those early days. And it was always amazing when we could get, I think of a couple customers where we, took 300 or 400 or 500 users and automated a big part of their workflow. Because some of these companies, they're onboarding and offboarding a couple employees a day sometimes. And there's just a lot of clicking and a lot of room for error in that process when you have a low-level technician working through a documentation document. So that the automation around, especially user onboarding, offboarding, seems like it was always really low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of with all automation, the time savings to me is just like the cherry on top. It's the accuracy that comes along with the process. You won't fat finger a key or forget to install one application. It all happens automatically. And that's really where the true value comes in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is a ROC, a Robotic Operations Center?
Yeah, so over here at SourcePass now, and it was really cool. Over at Machine Logic, automation was more or less a hobby, something that we could do for fun. What can we do to just make our lives easier? But now here at SourcePass, we've invested in the Robotic Operations Center, which is all we do is automate. I have a team below me. We take inbound requests, and basically we mostly use Roost, but we use some other automation tools, and just RPA, robotic process automation, and just automate as much as we can. It's nice having a team and sole focus on it. It's unlocked a lot of doors.
Yeah, team and dedicated tooling like Roost, and it's kind of cool how this has kind of sprung up into something that's like like you said, we were rolling our own, but by trying to kind of hook in Power Automate, and that had its own set of problems with, Microsoft would change an API, or we'd have a secret expire and everything would be broken. We'd be scrambling to fix it. It feels like it's better with some of these tools. It's taken some of that and abstracted that away and made it a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, huge shout out to Roost. We use them for most of our process automation, and they just make it so easy. I mean, it's very similar to Power Automate in the sense that if you don't have a lot of automation or coding experience, you can jump in there and it's a lot of drag and drop, plug and play. To get the true power of it, if you do have some of that coding knowledge, some of that Python knowledge, where you can really manipulate data and make it do what you want to do, that takes it to the next level. But just having dedicated integrations into all of the PSAs, the RMMs, all of the objects, the MSP tool set, having those pre-built integrations is just a game changer.
Yeah, I'm sure, because you're not having to go look up an API and then test it and write all your own, calls and everything. It's kind of drag and drop, kind of almost level.
Yeah, and Roost does a pretty good job too, that if they don't integrate with a tool, you can add in custom integrations and still make it play in the same way, drag and drop, and kind of visualize your workflows in that way.
Cool. I think so. Tell me how, we've got these broader, automations, but I was always blown away by the process of building automations for customers. Tell me how you get from, hey, a customer has a need, to a working automation. What's that process look like?
Yeah, so usually it starts off with, and this kind of goes for both internally and externally. Someone's like, hey, we want this process to be automated. So the very first thing I do is sit down with them and say, well, what's your process today? And a lot of times they're like, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean by process? We just send an email. Okay, well, let's take a step back and let's use a tool like Visio, and let's build out the flow of how you want it to go. If we can build it in Visio, we can likely automate it. So it's just talking about all the different datas, where are we starting, where do you want to get to? So that's really step one, is just making sure we understand everything we're trying to automate. From there, it's we go ahead, we build it out, do some robust testing with it, and assuming everything works well, you can more or less set it and forget it until, like you said earlier, a key expires or something like that happens. But the automations that you don't ever have to touch again and they just work in the background are some of the best ones. I can recall, the new user onboarding automation we did for one of our customers at Machine Logic. That thing is still working today. Every now and then there's some maintenance we have to do, but at this point we have to be in the thousands of hours that we've saved. And that's just one customer.
Yeah. It's interesting that there's lots of interesting different ways to automate stuff too, because we did that one where it was very much we wrote the code. But even then, if we're talking about the same one, we were using, we were pulling a lot of it from one third-party product, was driving a lot of the data. But also, if you leverage the third parties, like I think of our other customer that's deep into Okta and how much we automated there, and we bolted stuff on top of that, but you could automate a lot of that with just better understanding of the tools you had. And I bet on that other one on Okta, we've saved another couple thousand hours. Just
easy. Yeah, we did that one first, and yeah, that one's still alive today. Every now and then have to do some maintenance, but mostly it's set it and forget it. It just works.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think it's interesting how much of the automation process seems to be the scoping it, understanding it, really helping people understand, like so much in our space. The technical work often is a very small part of it. It's the planning, it's the understanding, it's really setting the proper requirements. And that's where the rub was often. Hey, well, we wanted to not only onboard the employees, but order them a new t-shirt. And you're like, well, I can only go so far, right? Like I can send an email about a t-shirt, but I can't, interact with your printing vendor. And so a lot of it was kind of just getting all the requirements and setting expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. My role today, I have a team, and they're the ones that are the code wizards. They understand the data and how to manipulate it, but they don't necessarily understand the MSP side of the business all too much. So the concepts of a PSA and everything a PSA does and everything behind that, they lack those concepts. So a lot of times I'll be meeting with customers or meeting with our internal departments and figuring out what the process is. I'll build out the process in Visio, do a lot of proof of concepts, make sure the endpoint APIs I'm hitting exists, that we're pulling the correct data. And then I can just hand that off to my team and they can build the entire workflow behind it. But yeah, to your point, building out that initial diagram is so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think, on this podcast, it seems like every conversation eventually ends up on AI. That just is how things have gone lately. Um, and I'm excited to dig into something you and I have talked about a couple times, but it really hit me in November. I was in Redmond for some meetings with Microsoft, and they were talking about, that was the first time I've heard about this idea of Copilot agents, of AI agents, agentic AI. These are the phrases you're even seeing in the news now. And we all went, "What? What's that?" And as they explained it to me, like, I had this moment where the two parts of my brain just merged, and I went, "Oh, this is everything Graham does now integrated with AI." Right? So you talked about, previously your automation was, maybe a front end website that was pulling in, maybe a form. We did a lot of forms where you had to answer a form with 15 variables, and those forms then get fed into maybe Power Automate, which drove the automation across the tool set. Now it's maybe it's the, Quest customer portal, drive-in Roost, which then drives all these outcomes. Agentic is just, a lot of it is just the idea of putting a large language model in the middle to add some additional intelligence. So, tell me what you are seeing in that space. I know you're an early adopter of AI. You're one of the people I know that I'm like, man, Graham has really kicked the tires hard on AI. So, tell me what you're seeing in that space.
Yeah, early adopter in like the OpenAI ChatGPT 3.5 when that first came out. Been a paid user ever since. Yeah, big fan of using it. A lot of people today, a lot of the AIs that are out there, they are helpful for personal tasks or personal kind of workflows. If, hey, I need to write this email, let me ask Copilot to help me write this email, or I want to aggregate this data. And where the agents are going to take it is, how can we make that, but make it across our entire org, kind of broader adoption. And to your point of using the kind of the Copilot chat agents, where I see that going is, you can build, instead of using a form, if you want to onboard an employee, you can say, chat with my onboarding agent. Hey, I want to onboard John Smith. Okay, what department are they in? You can answer that question. I mean, you can get rid of the forms altogether that have a lot of these condition-based, hey, if you answer this, show this question. You can just eliminate that and make it a conversation type of piece. That's just for onboarding. You can build it for all of your internal documentation or different processes. That's really where it's basically, you're taking Copilot or ChatGPT, but making it super refined into what you want it to be an expert in, what processes or what departments or those types of things.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm understanding it as well. Is like, there's two aspects to the agentic side. One is, you can train these agents to be experts on a topic. So you can say, hey, this is going to be our sales agents. So we're going to share our pricing book, all of our quoting tools, all of our quoting examples, our invoices, some of the documents that govern how we sell things, and have that agent fully understand that context and then be able to answer questions. Well, how would I quote this, and where do I get this pricing, and how do we set margins? And you could build an agent that's kind of very topical focused. I think there's going to be a lot of that, but I think the more powerful agents are going to be like you talked about. It's combining the intelligence of AI with the power of right? Of automation. That was how Microsoft first explained it to us. It's like, well, take what you're doing with Copilot and then plug it into Power Automate and look at what happens. And I think, a lot of the stuff you've built of what, the onboarding form is a really good example, but I think there's other interesting examples of, you guys have built a lot of automations that are triggered based on conditions, right? And a ticket comes in with this word. I need to go trigger this process of it gets classified this way, this alert gets raised, this gets moved, it gets dropped into this queue, right? These sort of things. Um, Take that, and instead of having to hit on a keyword, you could do it based on if you see a ticket with some very angry sentiment, or you see a ticket where somebody says, I think I've been hacked, or whatever the phrases are, you could build some deeper intelligence that then triggers similar automation.
Totally. I mean, if we focus on kind of an MSP aspect of it, you know, if we have a power outage at the client site, how many tickets does that create just from an automated standpoint? Firewall goes down, the servers are all going offline, all the WAPs are no longer responding. Now you have all these users sending in tickets. Hey, my internet's out. I can't do this. And now you have 20 plus tickets all in your PSA on all these different boards and all these different things, where I could see a time where you take all these inbound tickets, you can feed them through kind of an AI model, and the AI can say, hey, this ticket's related to this. Let's bundle it, or let's create an incident, move all these tickets into there automatically. I mean, back when I was a service delivery manager, that was half my job, was just organizing tickets and making sure tickets are tagged correctly and everything, you know, kind of like that. And you, based on that, when all these other tickets, you can start to say, hey, you didn't realize these two tickets were related, but using AI in the middle to say, kind of as an AI dispatcher, if you will, hey, I see this ticket on this board and this ticket on this board working on two different teams. These are related. We should raise a flag or send some type of alert that, hey, you should take a look at this. I think we found the root cause.
That's awesome. Yeah, I every time I look into the agentic stuff or have a conversation, I walk away convinced that my brain is only grasping a small percentage of what's coming. You know,
I think that's everybody. I mean, I think that's the whole landscape. AI is such a buzzword and can do so much and is doing so much. You can't understand everything that's going on, you know?
yeah, it's a paradigm shift. But it also drives this desire for my thinking to change, right? I still find myself like the classic example, I've used it a bunch of times on this podcast, is I've got Copilot at work. So I can go hit the chat in Copilot and do amazing search. But what's my default? Outlook search bar, right? And it's just like, I wish I could replace it with the chat GPT, the Copilot chat, so that the where I'm clicking would automatically be chat search. But you know, I'm wired after 20 years of using Outlook search. I go click the Outlook search bar, and that's a really hard thing to unwire in my brain, even though the Copilot search is generally more powerful and more effective. Although there's times I feel like it's time bound on how far it'll go in my email. I don't know if you felt that.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge. Is it feels like we're in beta in a lot of these products, especially where we're going to be a few years from now. It's just a lot of it's just, it doesn't do everything you want it to do, and because of that, you're just go back to your old habits and what you're used to.
Yeah, that's why I really appreciate Gemini from Google in the search results, because I don't have to change my habits. I just go Google like I always have, but the top section is Gemini results, and I'm guessing 70% of the time now, what I'm looking for is in that Gemini result space. I don't know about you, but it's pretty stinking good these days on that.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, I had a paradigm shift about a year ago where I swapped out Google as my first go-to, and now I go to either Copilot or personally ChatGPT. I think they're the best ones. And that's my first step for troubleshooting anything in life, whether it's help me with this recipe, how long should I air fry this thing, how long should I pressure cook this thing, or, you know, technical troubleshooting as well. Like, hey, why is this happening? And it's incredible. Just how powerful these large language models are.
It is. It really is. Where do you go when you need to look up obscure sports facts?
Google I still use for that, for sure. It depends. ChatGPT is really good for historical knowledge. Like if you want to know how many Stanley Cups this particular player has won, it will know that. But if you want to know the score or who had the most goals last night, probably Google's probably still the best way to go there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's fun. So, have you played much with any of the other? Have you played much with like Claude or Gemini?
Yeah, I try to play with all of them, really, just to understand their weaknesses, their strengths. Playing a little bit with DeepSeek these days, although should be a word of caution for anyone who's using that, because who knows what thing just came out of nowhere and kind of out of China. Who knows where your data's going?
Yeah.
Just got to be very, very mindful. I mean, that's true for any tool, not just that one, but just have to be mindful of that. But yeah, I use a lot of all the different ones. I only pay personally for OpenAI's ChatGPT, and then I have Copilot here at work. So those are the two paid versions I have. But I try to play around with all of them just to see their strengths, their weaknesses, those types of things. A good question I like to ask is, if it takes a question to kind of test the models is, hey, I have a wet t-shirt and it takes 5 minutes to dry in the sun. If I have 3 wet t-shirts, how long will it take to dry in the sun?
Wow.
And you'd be surprised how many of them say 15 minutes.
Right.
Which you put in just some brain power, you realize, well, it's still 5 minutes.
Right.
So it's fun to just, as I'm playing around with these new ones, just poking at it, seeing where their faults lie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fun. Yeah, it is interesting what Scott Hanselman and Mark Russinovich, I've mentioned this a couple times, had a really great session at Ignite where they were kind of gaslighting some of the models and trying to jailbreak them. And it's really interesting how some of the, they like took like an 18th century story and then stuck an iPhone into one sentence and just asked questions to see if it would pick up and go, yeah, the iPhone doesn't make sense in the context, little things like that, where you're just trying to see if you can break the models. And I think it's really interesting. Just the whole jailbreaking space is going to be wild.
Absolutely. And a lot of it's just all prompt engineering. I mean, having a super good prompt. I don't know about you, but in my OneNote, I have a bunch of different prompts that I can just copy paste to help me. Like, for one, since I do so much process Visio building, I have a Visio saying, hey, I'm going to give you a process. I want you to build the Visio for me. I want you to tell me what shape to use, what decision tree to use.
Really?
Pretty robust prompts, because if you just ask it to do that, it's wild how day to day you can ask the same question and get completely different types of responses. I mean, pretty much the same answers, but the way it gives you the answer is completely different.
Yeah.
So if you have a pretty dialed in prompt, you can kind of control that and make sure you're getting consistent data coming back.
Yeah, that's an area I definitely need to grow in, is like the quality of my prompts. I know I got 2 problems. One, I just don't do it enough. In my workflow, I'm on conference calls and looking at spreadsheets and sending emails. There's sometimes it's harder for me to get AI into my workflow because it's just not a great fit. And I think that's true of a lot of business leaders, as we've even tried demos with customers. It's often not the executives or business leaders that take to it because they have very efficient, very specific roles, and AI doesn't just jump into those things. But it's people writing code, it's people doing marketing, it's people doing project management, that it just changes their world. So for part of it for me is I just don't use it enough, and I would love to use it more, but it's just not always a key part of my workflow. But the second problem I have is I have too much of my Google foo gets in the way of my AI foo, right? Like I write too good of Google prompts, right? I know how to prompt Google to get my results, but that tends to be, I try to eliminate parameters, right? With my Google.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, I'm working with this version of this software running in this context. I'm having this specific error message under these circumstances. All of a sudden, Google gives me some really targeted data. But I think with the AI models, it's better to say, hey, I'm running this software and this is broken, and see what comes up, and then give it more data. And that's the other piece I struggle with. So the idea of recording your prompts is a really good idea to kind of have.
It's kind of funny. You can use the AI to help you create these prompts. If you say, hey, I want to create a prompt, this is what I'm after, it will tell you, it knows what it knows and will tell you exactly what to ask it, which is pretty powerful.
That's cool. I know that's the other thing that they're talking about with the AI agents and like the Copilot Studio now, where you can build your own Copilot agents. That's the other use case for it is sometimes the way to get value out of AI is to give it a string of prompts. Hey, pretend you're a 5-year-old who's hungry, whose favorite show is Bluey and hates bananas. All right, now that you have all of that, let me ask you this question. You get a different response than if you ask that question to just the generic agent.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's pretty much what the agents are, is prompts on steroids. You're giving it all the data, the parameters, how you want it to act, and then you can just start chatting with it. You're allowing whoever's using the agent or the chatbot not having to use a prompt. You've already taken care of that for them.
Right, right. So you've done that bit of work, and that's you leverage your skill set. So we're back to your robotic operations kind of mindset, where you guys have done the work to understand how to automate things, and it's just gonna. I think the flow into AI is just so logical. Of like, well, it's the same idea. You figured out how to say, well, yeah, you want to onboard an employee, but the reality is that's actually 15 different prompts. What shirt size, what department, what this, what that, and then the answers to all that trigger, a workflow in each case, right? It's the same to me. It's that correlation was just fascinating when I was connected the dots. And I was like, this is Graham's brain. Graham's gonna. You were already excelling in AI, but I knew that was like as soon as I saw the agentic stuff, I was like, this is how Graham does his everyday job.
Yeah, whatever I can do to make my life easier, So, I mean, I feel most IT guys are that way. Guys and gals, whatever you can do to make your life easier, think smarter, not harder.
Oh, we used to have that conversation all the time, right? We felt the best engineers were the laziest. If they were there was too lazy was a line, of course, but a lazy engineer would find a simpler way to do a complex thing than maybe an OCD engineer. So sometimes they could get a lot more work done in that way. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, fascinating. Well, what's got you excited coming up soon? You do anything interesting projects or anything you're playing with?
I'm getting involved in the kind of the Azure AI Foundry over here at SourcePass, getting creds and permissions and everything to play around with that, which I'm really excited just to see if I can tie that into Roost and see if we can tie into multiple third parties using kind of an AI agent, a chatbot that you can ask about ticket data, or you can create different things, or ask about Sentinel-1 alerts, or how can we, just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's pretty powerful to tie in third parties via API into the AI world and seeing what you can do.
Yeah, that AI Foundry, the Azure AI Foundry, is a lot of fun to play with. I've only done a little bit, but I've watched a few videos as well, and like the ability to, what do they have, like 1,500 models in there, and you just drop it down and say, today I want to play with, Claude, and then tomorrow I'm DeepSeek, and the next day after I am the latest version of OpenAI, and you can just switch it that quickly. But it's cool how you can even play with the parameters, like how much are you guessing? Like what's the confidence score you're going to respond with, and like how strict is the filtering on inappropriate results, right? Like whether that's, like how much am I enforcing you to be careful about how you respond? Even just being able to play with those parameters, I feel like you start to learn a lot about the models.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of control the narrative too during the chat conversation. Kind of steer the conversation back to the purpose of whatever the agent's supposed to be doing.
That's cool, and that's fun. Yeah, it's gonna be wild. I mean, I think the DeepSeek is really interesting to watch. I'm with you. I saw an article on LinkedIn. Somebody was like, "Hey, instead of all your paid AI, look, DeepSeek replaces them all for free." And I read that and I thought, "There's nothing free in this world. They're getting a lot out of you." It's like I I think it's important to be cautious with that nation state. China, they have a history of really trying, industrial espionage. They've, you go look at their J-22 um, fighter jet. It's an F-22. It is a perfect facsimile of our, greatest fighter jet. And so it's like they have no problems harvesting our data. So be careful. just willing
Exactly.
to give them. I'm not saying you can't use that model, and I know you can take DeepSeek and run a local copy, and you can do these things. But I've even seen some articles where the local copies are phoning home here and there more than people hoped they would. So it's the Wild West. It's going to be wild to see. Where we're investing the government. What started a $500 billion investment in AI.
Yeah.
Man, Microsoft's building $80 billion worth of data centers this year for AI. So it's wild. It's just going to be a wild ride. And I'd love to have you on as you get deeper, because I feel like you're on the cutting edge. You stay way ahead of it further than I am on just kind of using it. So it's always fun to chat with you.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it seems like every other week a new feature is coming out, and whether it's Gemini or OpenAI or Copilot, it's crazy. My outlook looks different every other week just from the new features they're adding in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, Graham. Thanks for joining us. It's always fun to chat with you. Really fascinating stuff. Keep up the good work. I think the Avs are going to finish out the season.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. I think they need another goal scorer. Losing Miko definitely hurts in that realm. I understand the move. I like the new guys that they're looking really good. But I think if we can get another goal scorer, we have the goaltending, we have the star power. I think, just got to get into the show, into the playoffs, and see what happens.
Yep.
Excited about the Four Nations tournament coming up, though. That's going to be a lot of fun.
That'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited about that as well. So,
who do you have on Sunday?
I'm really pulling for the Eagles, and I think they can do it. I think that running game and that offensive line is going to give the Chiefs trouble. But I feel like you can't bet against Mahomes. So I don't.
That's where I'm at.
He just feels inevitable. It just is like I hope it's the Eagles. I hate the Chiefs, Denver fan here, Broncos fan, but
same. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's so hard.
I know. It's gonna be a good game, but yeah, hopefully the Eagles can pull it off for the Broncos' sake.
Right. So I don't have to deal with those Chiefs fans. That's the big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll have you on in a bit, and just love to hear more about what you're learning. So thanks.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks, Nathan.
All right, take care. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Like and subscribe. We're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn. We'd love to get some more followers on LinkedIn. It's interesting, we can't post our Riverside videos to our LinkedIn page until we have 150 followers. It's a LinkedIn restriction. So, share the podcast if you enjoy it. YouTube is probably the other place where we're trying to get the most traction. Big shout out to Brandon. He puts a lot of work into producing those videos and shorts. So hope his trip to Rwanda is going well. And we look forward to catching you guys on the next episode. Thanks for your time today, and we'll catch you on the next one. There we go.
Cool, man.
Thanks for joining me. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.